When I preached on this gospel a few years ago, one of my parishioners, who was a member of the scientific community, said to me, "Father, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to my laboratory." I said, "Oh, what are you going to be doing?" He said, "I'm going to be trying to create either smaller camels or bigger needles." I said, "Good luck to you." Because as Ezekiel reminds us, we are not gods. We are human beings. And, a number of years ago, I had the opportunity, I had a mentor, a priest friend of mine, the late Father Harold Johnson, wonderful priest, and on his 70th birthday, I took him out to dinner. And I said, "Father, do you have any words of wisdom for me?" He says, "Father," he always called me Father. He said, "Father, I have two. One, there is a God. Two, I'm not him." I said, good to know, and I treasure those words, and I keep those words in my heart to remind myself in humility that we are not gods. And quite honestly, I don't know about you, I wouldn't want his job anyway. It's tough enough being a pastor of 2 parishes, never mind God. Because, God has, as the old saying goes, as the old song goes, the whole world in his hands. All of the cares, all of the challenges. And we might wonder in this day and age, where is God? With all of the strife, with all of the turmoil, with all of the anxiety we're going through as a society, as a world, we might wonder, where is God in all of this? Well, our history, our salvation history has proven that God is right there in the midst of it. And there is that element of the permissive will of God, the allowance of God for things to happen. Oftentimes people will say, well, why did God do this? And there's a difference between God doing something and God allowing something to happen. That's where that permissive will of God comes in. And for whatever reason, and we not being God, oftentimes cannot fathom it, we wonder, why did such and so happen? Why did this event or that event happen? In a couple of weeks, we'll be celebrating the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and the folks on the Gulf Coast. And so often after that tragedy, people ask me, well, why did God even allow this to happen? Never mind, they didn't think God caused it, but because oftentimes, natural disasters are oftentimes man-made through our own neglect of the environment. But people wondered why God would allow even such a thing to happen. Why wouldn't he step in? And honestly, my answer for them was, I don't know, because I'm not God. And we will find that answer. And I don't know about you, but my list of questions for God is getting longer and longer and longer. The older I get, the longer my list gets, because of the fact that I do have many questions myself as to why God would allow something to happen. But then I get an email this morning of my grandniece being born. Up in a beautiful picture of her in the hospital. She was born early this morning, and my brother became a grandfather for the 3rd time or 4th time, perhaps. I've lost track. And I've become a great uncle for about the 5th or the 6th time. And I say to myself, well, there's God right there. In the midst of all of the struggles, in the midst of all the challenges, there's this new life being born in the world. And with new life comes new hope. And the man whose feast we celebrate today, Pope St. Pius X, knew this, that even in his poverty, he found God. And maybe especially because of his poverty, he found God. As he was famous for saying, I was born poor, I lived poor, I will die poor. And he eschewed the trappings of the papacy. He hated the trappings of the papacy, much like our current Pope Francis. He hated all the trappings, all the Swiss guards and all the pageantry and all the jewelry and the gold, because he felt it got in the way of the true faith that we're called to celebrate. And oftentimes it does. Oftentimes we find ourselves in the world and we get caught up in all this, but we have to remember why we're here. And our job is to build up the kingdom of heaven here on earth so that one day we will share in the fullness of life of God's kingdom in heaven.